Rail in public ownership, stronger workers' rights, a publicly owned energy supplier, a ban on no-fault evictions and an end to non-dom tax. These are some of the key foundations to recovery after 14 years of austerity, privatisation and squeezed living standards that we can celebrate in this King's speech. But I want to touch on a few things that weren't included. I was pleased to support the amendment in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Liverpool Riverside. Removing the two-child benefit cap is the most cost-effective and immediate way for our government to lift 300,000 children out of poverty. The notion that in the sixth largest economy in the world we cannot find the money has to be wrong. So whilst the task force is good, I believe that we must make moves as soon as possible to make this a reality. Because if there was a national emergency, we would find the money. And if the levels of child poverty at the moment are not a national emergency, I do not know what is. I was also pleased to support the amendment in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Coventry South, to end the supply of arms to Israel and uphold international law. The government has called for a ceasefire, and we need to back this up with action. I wanted to focus the majority of my remarks on the dreadful legislative legacy on civil liberties left behind by the previous government. If we take simply the broad heading of our liberties, the previous government curbed the right to protest, the right to free assembly, freedom of speech, the right to organise in trade unions, and freedom from covert operations by the state itself. The right to vote has been suppressed, religious freedoms were attacked through the demonisation of Muslims and Muslim communities. Madam Deputy Speaker, we can't possibly pose as champions of freedom and democracy whilst these stains remain on our statute book. In addition, we should note that the previous government did nothing to correct the gross imbalance that now exists between employers and trade unions with regards to workers' rights. They promised to block the gross abuse that led to the scandal at P&O, but they did absolutely nothing. They also toyed with the idea of regularising the legislative mess around a woman's right to choose, and so addressed the issues of women's sexual and reproductive health and expanding access to safe and legal abortion throughout the country. We cannot repeat these serial failures to act. This is about what it means to live in a free society. Furthermore, there is a whole slew of secondary legislation, rules and guidance which also infringe or suppress the right of citizens, too many to mention, but I'm thinking of the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Act 2021, the Overseas Operations Act 2021, the Elections Act 2022 and the Public Order Act 2023. A running theme throughout these acts is in effect to place officers of the state, whether they are police officers, members of the armed services, members of the security service or others, above the law as they were acting, or if they were acting under the direction of a more senior officer. These laws severely curtail the fundamental rights of citizens I mentioned earlier. And under these acts, it is an officers of the state who decide what is lawful, not the courts. I remind honourable and right honourable friends that placing agents of the state above the law is almost the very definition of a police state. It's authoritarian, anti-democratic. It's not the legal basis of a free and democratic society. The same is true of any claim that officers of the state determine the law. They do not. Their duty is to uphold it. So over time, I would confidently expect each and every one of these pieces of legislation to face legal challenges, including, if necessary, in the European Court, because they are so flawed and draconian. Madam Deputy Speaker, if our democracy is going to work for everyone, it has to include everyone. Our party has already made important commitments to extend the franchise to young people by bringing automatic voter registration. I believe scrapping the exclusive voter ID laws that the Conservatives brought in is another urgent priority to strengthen engagement in the democratic process. A survey from More in Common estimates that more than 400,000 people were prevented from voting in the general election due to these undemocratic rules. The same research shows that people of colour were 2.5 times more likely to be turned away. Let's be clear that any law that disproportionately stops black and brown people from participating in our democracy is racist. The voter ID laws were introduced on the pretense of tackling voter fraud, yet between 2017 and 2022, there were just 18 convictions. Compare this to the 400,000 people blocked from voting at the ballot box. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are so many things that we really want to see moving forward, and I want to congratulate the Prime Minister for his announcement as well that there will be an early repeal of the Troubles Legacy Act 2023. This too was an anti-democratic authoritarian measure which places members of the armed forces above the law. The Prime Minister's announcement on this model should be a model for the rest of the legislation I have mentioned. And I want to point out that the government, that the people of this country, they voted against this government. So let's repeal all of their awful legislation, both quickly and decisively.